Have you gotten on anything for it or?
Yeah, yeah, I've been on an antibiotic since last Wednesday. I'm supposed to finish it up Friday, but the cough is much better. The nasal stuff is better, but I'm still not well. Haven't been out of the house since Saturday.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
So,
All right. Okay, let me get the live stream all set up. Okay, back to Zoom. All right. Well, we're finally all here. Okay.
oh,
Let's begin with prayer. God, we give you thanks for this time together. We ask that it would be inspiring and fruitful, so that we can go out and change the world in Jesus' name. Amen.
amen.
So, um, a couple weeks ago, I was trying to figure out where to go, and so I thought, you know what? Because what generally happens is we take July off because, with scheduling and things like that. And so that's probably going to happen again. So I went with a shorter one and I wanted to go with one that we had not done before. And so I thought of Ruth, which Ruth is a very short book of the Bible. Um, and one that we might be a little familiar with, but probably not overly familiar with. And so that's what we're going with. It is 4 chapters long. Um, and speaks of the story of Naomi and Ruth, and the other main character in there is Boaz. And so we're going to hear all about that. And we're over the next 4 weeks or so. I don't think I have anything scheduled on Tuesdays, as far as I know. So, so we will. So we're gonna jump into that. So let's go ahead and get started. Share. Um, all right. Slideshow. Um, Exploring God's providence, faithfulness, and redemption. And what I've been doing, I'll do again. These videos that are great explanations um, of the book, and so we'll check that out.
The Book of Ruth. It's a brilliant work of theological art,
Are
and it
y'all getting
invites
this?
us to reflect on
Yes.
Yeah.
how God is involved in the day-to-day joys and hardships of our lives. There are three main characters in the book: Naomi, the widow, Ruth, the Moabite, and Boaz, the Israelite farmer. And their story is told in 4 chapters that are beautifully designed. Let's just dive in and see how this all unfolds. Chapter 1 opens with this line: "In the days when the judges ruled." And it reminds us of the very dark and difficult days from the book of Judges. And here we meet an Israelite family in Bethlehem, struggling to survive through a famine. And so, in search of food, they move on to the land of Moab, Israel's ancient enemy. And there, the father of the family dies, and the sons marry two Moabite women, Ruth and Orpah. And then the sons, they die too. And so they leave only Naomi and these new daughters-in-law. And so Naomi, she has no reason to stay anymore. And so she tells her new daughters-in-law that she's moving back home. And Naomi, she knows that the life of an unmarried foreign widow in Israel is going to be very hard. And so she compels the women to stay behind. Orpah agrees, but Ruth does not. She shows remarkable loyalty to Naomi, and she says, "Wherever you go, I'm going to go. Your people will become my people, and your God will become my God." And so the two of them return to Israel together. And the chapter concludes with Naomi changing her name to Mara, which means bitter in Hebrew, and she laments her tragic fate. Chapter 2 begins with Naomi and Ruth discussing where they're going to find food. And it just so happens to be the beginning of the barley harvest. And so Ruth goes out to look for food, and it just so happens that she ends up picking grain in the field of a man named Boaz, who just so happens to be Naomi's relative. We're told that Boaz is a man of noble character, and he notices Ruth. And so after finding out more about her story, he shows remarkable generosity to her. He makes these special provisions so that the immigrant Ruth can gather grain in his field. And in doing so, Boaz is actually obeying an explicit command of the Torah to show generosity to the immigrant and the poor. Boaz is so impressed by Ruth's loyalty to Naomi. He prays for her that God will reward her for her boldness. So Ruth comes home that day, and Naomi finds out that she met Boaz, and she is thrilled. She says Boaz is their family redeemer. Now, this family redeemer thing, this was a cultural practice in Israel where if a man in the family died and he left behind a wife or children or land, it was the family redeemer's responsibility to marry that widow, to take up the land and protect that family. So Naomi, she begins to hope that perhaps there might still be a future for her family. Chapter 3 begins with Naomi and Ruth making a plan to get Boaz to notice their situation. So Ruth is going to stop wearing clothes of a grieving widow, and she's going to show signs that she's available to be married. And so Ruth goes to meet Boaz on the farm that night. And as she approaches, Boaz wakes up and he's totally startled. And Ruth makes her intentions very clear. She asks if Boaz will redeem Naomi's family and marry her. Boaz is once again amazed by Ruth's loyalty to Naomi and her family, and he calls Ruth a woman of noble character. It's the same term used to describe the woman of Proverbs 31. So Boaz tells Ruth to wait until the next day, and he will redeem both Ruth and Naomi legally before the town elders. And so the chapter ends with Ruth returning to Naomi, and they marvel together at all of these recent events. In chapter 4, it all comes together. It turns out, at the last minute, Boaz discovers there is a family member who's closer to Naomi than he is, and he's actually eligible before him to redeem the family. But at the last second, this family member finds out that he's going to have to marry Ruth, the Moabite, and so he declines. But Boaz, remember, he knows Ruth's true character, and so he acquires the family property of Naomi, and he marries Ruth. And so just at the beginning, how Ruth was loyal to Naomi's family, so now Boaz is loyal to Naomi's family as well. The story concludes with a reversal of all of the tragedies from chapter 1. So the death of the husband and the sons is reversed as Ruth is married again and gives birth to a new son, granting joy to Naomi. And this symmetry between the opening and the closing, it's even more remarkable. So remember, the opening tragedy was followed by a great act of loyalty on the part of Ruth. And that is now matched by Boaz's act of loyalty that leads to the family's final restoration. And this symmetry, it highlights the design of the internal chapters as well. So each of the chapters begins with Naomi and Ruth making a plan for their future. And that's followed by a providential meeting between Ruth and Boaz. And each chapter concludes with Naomi and Ruth rejoicing at what's taken place. This story is beautifully designed, and that design actually connects with a really interesting feature of the story, and that's how little God is mentioned. Right? The characters talk about God a few times, but the narrator actually never once mentions God doing anything directly in the story, and that's its brilliance. Because God's providence is at work behind every scene of this story, weaving together the circumstances and choices of all these characters. So Naomi, her tragedy leads her to think that God is punishing her, but actually the whole story is about God's mission to restore her and her family. And he's doing so through Ruth, through her boldness and loyalty, which brings healing to Naomi's life, but not without Boaz, who's a no-nonsense farmer who's full of generosity and loyalty. And so God uses his integrity combined with Ruth's boldness to save Naomi and her family. And so this story brilliantly explores the interplay of God's purposes and will with human decision and will. God weaves together the faithful obedience of his people to bring about his redemptive purposes in the world. And that leads to the real end of the story. The book of Ruth concludes with a genealogy, showing how Boaz and Ruth's son, Oved, was the grandfather of King David, from whom came the lineage of the Messiah. And so all of a sudden, these seemingly mundane, ordinary events in this story are woven into God's grand story of redemption for the whole world. And so the book of Ruth invites us to consider how God might be at work in the very ordinary, mundane details of our lives as well. And that's what the book of Ruth is all about.
All right. So, what we're going to do is I did not post up I did not make the PowerPoint where it would have the entire reading on there because I can just read it out loud and y'all will read along with me. It would have the same effect because it's much more of a story. So I'm going to read chapter 1. And then we will talk about that. All right. I will say before we get started with that, when it like I read about, when it was written and who wrote it and things like that, but the truth is we don't really know. And at the end of the day, with this book, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't change the context. It doesn't change much about it at all. And so I'm not really going to waste y'all's time jumping into all that stuff. But let's go ahead and get started. In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land, and a certain man of Bethlehem in Judah went to live in the country of Moab. He and his wife had 2 sons. The name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife Naomi, and the names of the 2 sons Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephraithites from Bethlehem in Judah. They went into the country of Moab and remained there. But Elimelech, the husband of Naomi, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. These took Moabite wives. The name of the one was Orpah, and the other was Ruth. When they had lived there about 10 years, both Mahlon and Chilion also died, so that the woman was left without her 2 sons and her husband. Then she started to return with her daughters-in-law from the country of Moab, from where she heard in the country for she had heard in the country of Moab that the Lord had considered his people and given them food. So she set out from the place where she had been living, she and her 2 daughters-in-law, and they went on their way to go back to the land of Judah. But Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, "Go back each of you to your mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you as you have dealt with the dead and with me. The Lord grant that you may find security, each of you, in the house of your husband." Then she kissed them, and they wept aloud. They said to her, "No, we will remain with you to your people, and we will return with you to your people." But Naomi said, "Turn back, my daughters. Why will you go with me? Do I still have sons in my womb that they can become your husbands? Turn back, my daughters, go your way, for I am too old to have a husband. Even if I thought there was hope for me, even if I should have a husband tonight and bear sons, would you then wait until they were grown? Would you refrain from marrying? No, my daughters, it has been far more bitter for you than for me, because the hand of the Lord has turned against me." Then they wept aloud again. Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her. So she said, "See, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. Return after your sister-in-law." But Ruth said, "Do not press me to leave you or to turn back from following you. Where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge." Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die. There will I be buried. May the Lord do thus and so to me, and more as well, even if death parts me from you. When Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more to her. So the two of them went on until they came to Bethlehem. When they came to Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them. And the woman said, Is this Naomi? She said to them, Call me no longer Naomi, call me Mara, for the Almighty has dealt bitterly with me. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi when the Lord has dealt harshly with me, and the Almighty has brought calamity upon me? So Naomi returned together with Ruth the Moabite, her daughter-in-law, who came back with her from the country of Moab. They came to Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest. All right. Do you want time to read back through that, or should we just move on? Your choice.
I'd say we just move on.
All right. Okay, I'm glad somebody answered. So we start off here with a little timing where it says quite plainly when this was happening. And it was in the days when the judges ruled. So the book of the Bible right before this is Judges. And so it's a story of, well, it's the story of Naomi, which is strange because Ruth is the chief actor in this, but Naomi is the main character because it's really as much about her life as anybody else's. And so it begins with her and her family in Bethlehem. Her husband, Elimelech, and their sons Mahlon and Chilion. They have some very difficult names to say. And so there's a famine in Bethlehem, well, in all of Judea. And so they decide to leave because they heard that there was food in Moab. And so that's where this family goes to. They go to Moab. And when they get there, Elimelech dies, which leaves Naomi as a widow. But no big deal. She still has her sons because that's the way those families worked. What in that culture was you had a couple and the man provided for the woman, and when they had sons, if the father died first, then they would provide for the mother as long as she lived. Okay?
Stephen, are you planning to do that?
No.
I was afraid you were going to say that.
Well, it was honestly the job of the firstborn son anyway, which is good because he lives where you live. But I mean that's the way it worked. And so and they went and they got married, but before they had children, both of the sons died. And so when you hear about widows in the Bible, this is that kind of situation where there are no men in the family. There is no husband and there are no sons. And so therefore there's no one to provide for them. And so that was her trouble. And so, she was a foreigner living in a foreign land. And so she decides, all right, well, the best thing for me to do is to go home. you know, at least then maybe people will take pity on me. But she knew it was going to be hard. And so the right thing to do is, and I found it interesting, they said, return to the house of your mother. You don't often hear that turn of phrase in the Bible. It's usually the house of your father. Because again, who would be caring for them? Wouldn't be the mother, it would be the father. Because if it was the mother, all you'd be doing would just be putting her back in the same position that she was already in. And so pretty much it would be go back to your home, and maybe they can find a husband for you. You know, maybe they can set it up again, you know, even though you've already been married. And so go back. At least if nothing else, you'll have somebody to care for you there. Because she's like, you know, I'm a poor widow. I've got nothing. I have no way to care for you. And so she urges them out of love to go home, to go back to their houses. And knowing also that she is taking them away from their families because she's going back to Judah, going back to Bethlehem. And so at first, both daughters-in-law say no. No, we're going to stay with you. But then she asks again, and Orpah decides, okay, maybe not. But Ruth goes into this beautiful, somewhat uh, famous statement: "Where you go, I will go." Um, you know, and which makes me think it's so well known. How often is that taken out of context?
A lot of times.
Um, a lot of times, I think it's used in terms of like marriage and women and men.
Right. Yes.
But it's between a daughter-in-law and a mother-in-law. Uh, and so, I mean, it's a beautiful phrase. I mean, it's sort of a song, and it shows her loyalty. Um, you know, it it just shows how wonderful Ruth is. And so they go back, and when they get there, um, they she says, "Don't." I mean, that everybody's all you know, oh, she's back kind of thing. And more than likely, I mean, since they didn't have social media or telephones back then, people didn't know that Naomi left, and she left with a full family and she came back with nothing. You know, what mother would not want not just one son but two? She had a husband, she had two sons, everything was going right. And presumably they would have been, I mean, they probably had at least some resources because they were able to leave. And when she gets back, all she has with her is a daughter-in-law. And you know, no means to support herself, but the goodwill of other people. I mean, that was her destiny as it appeared. And so she says, "Don't call me Naomi anymore, call me Mara," which in Hebrew means bitter. Um, because God has dealt harshly with her, or I don't know, maybe at the time she's just a bitter old lady. Um, but you know, the chapter begins and ends in Bethlehem, but it's like a whole lifetime has happened in between. And you know, left left with good fortune, hoping for better fortune, and came back broken. And yet Ruth stayed by her. And so, um, So, I mean, the theme of this chapter, as we shall see, now I'm trying to figure this out. Hold on. Stop sharing. I'll share again. Huh.
The Book of Ruth. It's a brilliant.
Okay, I don't want to watch it again. I'm trying to figure out because I embedded it into the PowerPoint, and I'm trying to figure out how to go to the next. There we go. All right, so chapter 1, faithfulness in the face of loss. So the key themes of this chapter are grief, loyalty, and identity. Grief in that obviously there's a lot of death in this chapter, well, 3 in particular, and also the loss of Orpah probably would have been significant as well because they were saying goodbye to a family member. And then the loyalty of Ruth and identity being some of the identity being that that Naomi was coming home to her people, but also the identity that Ruth found being a daughter-in-law. The summary in this is Ruth and Naomi face tragedy and journey to Bethlehem. Ruth pledges faithfulness to Naomi in a powerful act of covenant love, which is the where you go, I will go stuff. And then what we will talk about is the life application where faith begins with showing up. Grief and hope can coexist. And so let's discuss that. And so when I say discuss, that means that we participate by everyone talking. And so why do you think Ruth stayed?
My first thought was that she either A, was not close to her family or didn't really have family.
Yeah, I kind of wondered that too. I mean, did she have anywhere to go? But that sort of takes the
message out of because
it really does.
maybe
That's not loyalty, that's necessity.
yeah, maybe she really did love Naomi and felt like she was her family.
Yeah.
And you know, I don't know how long we're talking about before her husband died and then her sons died. Like how long have they basically been together?
Well, at the very least, I mean, the most they could have been together is 10 years
Okay.
because that's how long they were in Moab.
Okay.
They were there for 10 years. And so likely shorter than that.
Okay.
But also, it's interesting that in that time, neither one of them had children.
Which would have been very unusual, wouldn't it?
It would have been. Unless sterility ran in the family, which that's one thing that doesn't run in families because it couldn't. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a family.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, it is strange. None of them had kids, but you know, one of the things that like the genre of this is like a folk, and they reference this in that video, like a folklore. So like this was written like a short story, and so the historicity of it, I don't know.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, but what we do know based on the way that it ends is that there there was a Ruth and a Boaz because they are part of David's lineage and thus part of our Lord's lineage.
Right.
Um, and so also, this is the little town of Bethlehem. I don't know how many other times Bethlehem is mentioned in the Bible, but it's not a lot. Um, but you know, the house and lineage of David. Well, here we go, Bethlehem. Um, and so you know that's one of the reasons that this story is so important. Is that it shows that kind of thing. Um, but also this this entire book of the Bible is focused on women primarily. Um, and that's an important fact. So I don't know if any of you uh happen to see, I don't know how much y'all are on Facebook. Glenn Howard posted something yesterday. Um, well, he posted a lot because he's Glenn. Um, and but one of them was he was a little distressed that in a conversation he had, and he didn't say who it was with. He was, you know, he loves the way that Pastor Becca gives communion. By the way, she's not here today because Jonathan's grandmother died in the funerals this afternoon. If you missed
Oh,
that,
Yeah.
now where does Jonathan's grandmother live?
the West Columbia.
Oh, okay.
I mean, to be blunt, she doesn't. But
Yeah.
where
But
did she live would probably be a more accurate question. But yeah, but yeah, so, but at any rate, you know, when she gives communion, she says, "Beloved," which is beautiful. I mean, I love that she does that, and so does Glenn. Well, apparently, someone said that they're not that they were opposed, but they're just not yet sure about a woman pastor.
really,
Um, which is, I mean, and I mean, to which of course I had
all
to
these
comment.
years,
I mean, like I had what's that, Margaret?
after all these years,
Yeah, yeah. My first comment back was, you know, first of all, women have been ordained in the Lutheran Church longer than I've been alive. Um, and you know, secondly, you know, Pisgah has had great. I said no. I said one of the some of the best pastors I know are women. One of whom served at Pisgah,
right,
Christine Stockson.
right,
Uh, and then you know, I said sadly, women are still having to prove themselves as women in ministry. But and lastly, I said, but I have no doubt it won't take long for this one to do just that. Um,
right?
you know, and I mean, because she's great. I mean
She,
that's
I mean, she was meant to do this.
yeah, yeah, without a doubt. Well, one person, not of this congregation, the only comment they made was First Timothy chapter 2, which,
what does it say?
well, not what this person thinks it says, I can assure you. Um, First Timothy chapter 2 is probably not the best because it's not about women in ministry at all. It says that women should learn in silence, and in full submission. It's about marriage, but here's the cultural re- here's the cultural reality. Everyone learned in silence back then. That's how they learned. And so if a woman was reading this or having it, or more likely having it read to her, um, she would have heard the sentence when you learn, not the part about in silence. That's our modern ears hearing it and putting the kibosh on women. This would have been a very liberating part to suggest that women can learn. But what I responded to this person with was about 7 Bible passages that included women in ministry. That examples of women serving in the church and things like that. And I said, and apparently I didn't say it clearly. I said, it's interesting that the Bible was written in a very patriarchal society, and yet time and time again, God was countercultural. Well, this person heard me say, basically thought that I was going all feminist on them, and said, so does that mean that, that the 10 Commandments don't matter because they were written in a patriarchal society? No, not what I'm saying. And I said, I'm not saying that at all. I'm simply saying that God, that, oh, and then he said, as for me and mine, we're going to stick with the Bible.
Well,
Dude,
good.
I just gave you 7 examples from the Bible. I mean, like, which part? So you're sticking with your parts of the Bible? I mean, and this is on Glenn's Facebook page. So, I, I wasn't, and I don't do this anyway. I mean, like, I don't even know. Both Stacy and Mary Margaret are like, why are you even engaging in this?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I felt like, though, as the lead pastor here, kind of defending my partner,
Yeah.
Right.
and so, but then, and I said, it's not about that. It's the fact that God is countercultural, that God uses women. And then he goes, so what about Second Timothy chapter 2? Okay, now, first of all, he originally said First Timothy, and now he switched to Second Timothy. And again, First Timothy really didn't have anything to do with ministry. It had to do with marriage, like women in marriage. And so I was like, well, maybe I read the wrong one. And so I read Second Timothy. There's nothing in Second Timothy about any of it except for this, and I will read you. And so this is kind of how I ended it, because I said, you know what, you're right. I said, thank you for reminding me. Second Timothy, is a good thing to remember. God bless you, because I'm not going to get into an argument about. Basically, I'm not going to get into an argument about Bible with an unarmed person. It wouldn't be fair. It's I could. I mean, I'm gonna win. I have a little bit more education in this. I mean, but I'm not going to win because they're not going to hear me. But
Because it's a losing battle.
so here's what. Um. So Second Timothy 23, shun youthful passions and pursue righteousness, faith, love, and peace, along with all who call on the name of the Lord with a pure heart. Have nothing to do with stupid and senseless controversies. You know that they breed quarrels, and the Lord's servant must not be quarrelsome, but kind to everyone, an apt teacher, patient, correcting opponents with gentleness. God may perhaps grant that they will repent and come to know the truth, and that they may escape from the snare of the devil, having been held captive by him to do his will. And so my response was, you're right. You know what? This is a great verse. I'm sorry. I'm especially drawn to these verses. Didn't say what they were because I doubt he's going to look them up. But if he does, he's going to say, okay, I'm just not going to engage in this stupid conversation because the Bible tells me I really shouldn't. Um, but the truth is not that stupid of a conversation. But oh, in my original post, I also said one of the things that we do have to deal with is with race sexuality and gender it's generational. There are generational things that are in play here. Some people, because there are people older than me, which means that they lived a portion of their lives when there were no female pastors. And that's how they
Right.
grew up. And maybe they haven't had one much. And so, I mean, like I said, I don't know where this came from. We've got people that weren't here when Chris Doxson was here, you know. But he did say it was somebody 20 years older than him. And, but we even have those that have joined since then. But, you know, it, but it's important for everybody to give them time to see, because, Pastor Becca got a unanimous vote. So apparently it's not somebody that's that worried about it. And so, let her prove them wrong, and she will.
Yeah.
But there's some generational things that go on, that this book of the Bible really really sort of hits up against things that we still struggle with today, and it starts with the importance of women. The very fact that in this male-driven society, when the Bible was written, that there is an entire book dedicated to the loyalty of and love of these women is very countercultural. During this time, women were not much more than property, but here's a whole story about women and about the way God took care of them. Although God isn't mentioned, there is that undergirding there of faith, of God's providence, that God is acting in these women's lives.
And
And
yeah.
because of that, their story has lived on, for all of these years to continue to teach us. That's number one. Number two, countercultural issue here is this woman is a foreigner. A foreigner that is, okay, she's a widow herself coming back into Jerusalem. And so, they didn't, I mean, there are times in the Bible when it says don't mix with godless people, like with people of other races, other religions, right?
Mhm.
And those same things have been quoted throughout forever. You know, and this, the whole really anti-biracial couple thing ended about the time I was starting college. It became much more just normal with people. I mean, and now it just is. I mean, because I I don't care if God had a problem with it, he wouldn't make their children so beautiful. Um,
Right.
you know, but how many times prior to this, and probably still in some places today, is the Bible quoted about people marrying outside of their race? Okay, guess what? This Moabite woman is an ancestor to Jesus. Because she was loyal, um, and they came back to Israel. She'll end up marrying Boaz, um, and having a child with Boaz. But this Moabite woman gave birth to Obed, who gave birth to Jesse, who gave birth to David. Well, they didn't give birth, but they were the fathers of. Okay. And then it goes down all the way to Jesus.
And is Ruth not mentioned in the
In the
genealogy
genealogy of Jesus, yes.
instead of Boaz?
Yes. Yep.
When we were talking about Becca, within the weeks, somebody posted on Facebook, without women preachers, we would have no knowledge of the resurrection.
Right.
And this is Jurgen Moltmann. Oh, it's backwards. That's not good. Okay.
No, it's not. It wasn't backwards when you put it up.
Oh, it wasn't.
Backward to you, but not to us.
Yeah,
Okay.
right.
Because you have it set up on Zoom to not do that.
Okay.
Or no, probably what you have set up on Zoom is that it reverses it, and that made it right. I don't know.
Yeah,
Okay.
a double reversal.
Yeah, but what? But that's exactly right. And by the way, that was one of the Bible passages, and I didn't spell out the Bible passages. I just assumed because this person did not spell out a Bible passage that I wouldn't either. And so, hey, go look it up. But clearly he didn't, because he didn't even look up his own Bible passage. It was just one of those that he knew from church somewhere that 2 Timothy 2 said you're not supposed to have women preachers. And that ain't at all what it says. I almost wanted to say, dude, if you're going to quote the Bible, there are there are several other verses that would be stronger for your argument than this one. I mean, you can go to the Corinthians where, it says women should keep silent in church. It wasn't this passage. I mean, but again, when you're dealing with letters that are written, you also have to take into consideration why they were written and who they were written to. Um, I mean, it's just. I also wanted to say, dude, if you're married, why don't you take this passage to your wife and see what she says about it?
Well, now if she's not Lutheran and is a member of one of the fundamentalist
She ain't living by it though. Maybe, probably not. Well, okay. While we're at it, I'll just read it to you. And I mean, we got a few ladies in here. This is Bible study.
we got three. You forgot Margaret. Just because you can't see her doesn't.
No. I remember Margaret. We have four. I forgot Susie.
Oh,
But-
okay.
Yeah, Susan's not here today.
Oh, so
Yeah.
three. All right, let me go back to Timothy. I'm not used to flipping through a Bible anymore. Generally, all right, here it is. The first part's all about prayer and thanksgiving. So again, don't know why you're going to quote a whole chapter when half of it doesn't. I desire then that in every place the men should pray, lifting up holy hands without anger or argument. I mean, unless you're going to say that men should pray, but that's not what this is about. That's just like that people should pray, but whatever. Also, that women should dress themselves modestly and decently in suitable clothing, not with their hair braided or with gold, pearls, or expensive clothes, but with good works, as is proper for women who profess reverence for God. Okay, well, women are professing reverence, but it's about how women dress. And so we're not even getting to the, being subjective part. This is about how you dress. So again, your wife got any gold on today?
I've got
Let
a
a
gold
woman
ring.
learn in silence with full submission. I permit no woman to teach or have authority over a man. She is to keep silent. For Adam was, I guess there's that. For
Okay.
Adam was formed
Yeah.
first, then Eve, and is not deceived, but a woman deceived and became a transgressor. Yet she will be saved through childbearing, provided that they continue in faith and holiness and with modesty. But here's the thing. It is like the title of this is about wives. And so, really, what it's talking about, and remember, the teaching was not in a parish, the teaching was in a household. And so, what she's saying is that a woman shouldn't teach a man. Well, there's another reason for that. Because, see, women weren't educated back then. And so they wouldn't have been teaching anyone. I mean, and we're not saying that they're not supposed to preach, they're not supposed to teach. And it's just probably also had to do with, reading and writing.
Mm.
Not just about faith stuff. And so, again, I want to ask, in your church, sir, who are your Sunday school teachers? Because for the love of God, if you don't have women teaching your Sunday school classes, who's teaching them? I mean, just say it. And if this is the case, Doug just applied it to, it also applies to school.
Yeah.
So, man, that means I took 3 classes that are worthy in all of my education before I went to college. And one of them was calculus, and I don't know any of that.
Well, and Stephen, you had one male teacher in middle school.
Mr. Robinson.
Yes.
Yeah, I learned a lot of things from him about not, I mean, he was fired for like jacking up a student, which,
Yep.
by the way, wasn't his first time because I witnessed him do it several times in my class. But it was, he was an African American teacher, and he would do it to the young black boys. And probably, I mean, it was probably a racial thing, not against race, but probably as a way of instruction to them. Still not allowed, but yeah, I mean, like, no, so I didn't learn much in there, but I had Mr. Rao. He was good. Took him for science. I had Coach Subtle for U.S. history, which I know no U.S. history now because of that.
He called for a parent conference and didn't show up. I mean, he said, he called us and said, I need a parent conference. We scheduled it. He didn't show up. When he finally got out of the teachers' meeting and we talked to him, he had no clue who Stephen was. And it was obvious.
Well, that must have been at the beginning of the year. I don't know why he would have done that. I mean, I made like 100s in his class because he would give us the test before we would take it.
I don't remember why he wanted.
Well, it wouldn't have been the behavioral issue because he was the worst behaved of all of us. He probably didn't know. They probably told him he needed to have parent teacher conferences, and everybody else had them with y'all. So that he might as well join the list.
No, nobody else had him. I wonder if he got confused with who you were.
Maybe. I don't know. But at any rate,
He was not one of the sharpest knives in the drawer.
yeah. But I mean, but at any rate, I engaged in this conversation yesterday about what the Bible says about women in ministry, but if that's going to be your argument, that's still a weak one. I mean, and again, there's too many examples of women being ministering and teaching and preaching in scripture to say that the 2 verses or 3 verses are the once and for all, by God, nothing happens. It's just silly. More than half of our bishops in the ELCA are women now. And before long, they're going to start having male in ministry support groups, and that's going to be the norm. And people, 2 generations from now, people are going to be like, I don't know about having a male pastor. That's weird. because most of the seminaries are filled. I mean, there's a lot more female candidates coming out than male. And so, you know, good luck. I mean, if it's an issue, but I mean, I mean,
Oh,
I don't know. I, I don't know who it would be, but I also am not real worried about it because, again, she'll prove them wrong. That's how it always works. The sad part is that how it works for women is if they're not good, then no women are good, and if they're great, then all women are great. But for me, if I'm not good, then I'm not good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, I followed a woman at my last congregation, and they did not want to interview another one when they were interviewing. But then when I left, they got a great uh what's interim, a female interim that proved them that that was not the case, and they actually have a female pastor now. But you know, it's kind of silly. But at any rate, just know that those are important facts about the book of Ruth and the importance of Ruth and Naomi being examples of the faith. All right, well, it is noon as I'm hearing the church bells ring, and I am going to be attending a funeral in West Columbia for Becca's grandmother-in-law, Pastor Becca's grandmother-in-law. So I need to go home and try to grab a quick bite before I head over there to the funeral. So
Do we know anything about Larry Kaiser yet?
yeah, it's Thursday at Kaufman Harmon.
Downtown here?
I think. I mean, Wanda's the one that sent it to me. I mean, but she didn't send a bit. So I would just go online to Kaufman Harmon and look it up.
Okay.
But
yeah.
you know she works for Kaufman Harmon when she just put CH and I had to figure out what she meant.
having visitation after the service and then the burial, private burial later, I think it said.
Yeah. Which according to her, he wanted to be cremated and put between his parents. But she just said, I don't know if his kids know that. But so if that's the case, the burial will be here. But, you know,
Remains to be seen.
I don't know who's doing the funeral because if it's me, nobody's told me. But I mean, you know, like I told y'all the other day, I mean, I've never met the man. So
Well, he quit coming when his mom died.
yeah. And so, and that was probably quite a long time ago.
Depends on how old you are. Doesn't seem that long ago.
Well, good point. Good point. All right. Well, y'all have a great day. I'll see you sometime, somewhere.
Yes.
Feel better, Diane.
Okay, thank you.